Welcome to Lou Palumbo's Between the Lines. Problem solving for our future. Lou. Common sense, logic, and reasoning. Lou. The man that can't stand hate and animus. Lou. Stimulating the thought process of America. Lou. Where being right is not political, it's factual. Lou. Providing real solutions in real time. And now, here's your host, Lou Palumbo.
Don't know where to start with this conversation. We have so many things that are nagging this country today. Perhaps most importantly is the division that exists after witnessing the midterm outcome a couple of weeks ago. To say it was a little disconcerting is an understatement. And the reason I'm prepared to say that is because I think that this conversation left the political discussion. It left whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. It left the whole issue of a political agenda. I'm just trying to figure out how much more the American public is prepared to take. And without being judgmental, but just simply asking a straightforward question, anyone that voted to support the Democrats, which is clearly a prerogative, I'm not going to critique that one way or the other. I'm going to say you're basically supporting the agenda and policies at your border, which lend itself to over 5 million people coming in illegally into this country since the Biden administration started. That you are endorsing the policies governing your major cities where the criminal element is operating with impunity. I guess you're okay with that. I guess you're okay with these ridiculously high gas prices, which were over 60% higher than when the president came into office. I guess you're okay with the spending of over $5 trillion, which is why eggs are 38% higher than they were in 2021. That's the only thing I can glean from this. You know, in Pennsylvania, you're prepared to basically put into office an individual, no fault of his own, had a stroke and has brain damage that cannot reconcile auditory information. From what I can gather from this debate, he's having a problem reconciling what he can read on a screen. Opened up the debate by saying good night to everyone. We voted him into office. I guess you're okay with this agenda. This is your country. Most importantly, it's the country of your children and their future. So I had hoped that everyone would divorce themselves from their politics and start to vote in a direction that lent itself to regaining some type of sanity here, because if you think what's going on in our country is healthy and sane, you're grossly mistaken. We are as unstable, I think, as we've ever been in the history of the country, certainly within my lifetime. I attribute that to the fact that we lack leadership. We lack a voice of calm and reason. We lack a voice that has the ability to speak to the populace and make them believe that we speak to everyone in this country, not just to those who voted for us, who sent us money, who are politically affiliated, but to everyone. For those that didn't have the privilege and the honor of observing John Kennedy, this guy was a textbook case of galvanizing a country. In fact, he galvanized the world. I often tell everyone, this whole planet was enamored with this man. It was his ability to speak and to reach people. But I'm going to say something else that I constantly bring up. And we're not paying attention to this. I'm wondering, have we overpopulated this country? In my lifetime, I told you the population more than doubled from 150 million to 335 million. From the year 1970, I was still in college. We added another 135 million from that point, another 50 million people from the millennium. We're now letting more people in. We're not taking care of the people we have here. If you don't believe that, don't listen to me. Do your own research. This is the thing I tell everyone all the time. I'm not here to spoon feed you. I'm here to give you food for thought. I'm asking you, don't be spoon-fed by this 24-hour news cycle, or for that matter, the local news media, because they're all agenda-driven. They don't really care about what's healthy for this country. They're trying to figure out what's going to position them. Go take a look at the salaries on some of these people that are in the 24-hour news cycle. It will just absolutely offend your sense of decency. They don't care what they say, as long as they have people listening to it and sponsors that, add to it and, viewership and on and on and on. It's a really interesting equation, all at the expense of our young people, guys. You better pay attention. I know Americans have this terrible habit of taking this country for granted. You're worried about your flat screen TV, the next generation of your iPhone, your vacation. Now we're chasing electric cars, which is just absolutely hilarious. I do want to tell you something you're going to find interesting. About 2 weeks, I had to fly into New York. Flying into New York, we came in over the Atlantic Ocean. There were at least a dozen container ships off the coast. I don't know what to say to you. Where's Buttigieg? This is the same man, by the way, who said at the beginning of this administration they were going to fund $5 billion worth of charging ports. Haven't even started. Electric cars. Guys, you do understand that in the summer, in the city of New York, to start with, the demand for electricity is so high when the temperatures climb, because the AC units are running, that we have blackouts. We do not have enough energy to support the demand of electricity right now, but we do have the ability to support that demand. Not to break everyone's heart, but your steam turbines are fueled by fossil fuel and nuclear energy primarily. The two forms of energy we don't want to delve into. By the way, instead of them lying to you, we have the ability to make these state-of-the-art nuclear reactors with fail-safe mechanisms redundantly. We just, for whatever reason, we've over-intellectualized this thing, and we've got a lot of people that have too much free time on their hands, and they're out there championing these causes. And it's a minuscule percentage of the country that's steering the country. I spoke to you guys about this before. California, I got the memo. I don't want nuclear reactors in California, geologically unstable. If those plates were to shift vertically, I don't care how you build a structure. We got a problem. Horizontal shifting is a different issue. I learned a little bit living out there. You could go into the neighboring states, Nevada and Arizona, where you got lots of desert, right? Not densely populated, right? Very sparsely populated. You could build these state-of-the-art reactors and fuel half the damn country. Why would we ever do that, folks? That might lend itself to something called problem solving, which is really what's driving this show, this podcast. I'm just sick of the crazy, and I hope that you are too. I'm getting waved at by the producer here. I don't know if he's saying hi to me or if he wants me to get on with the program here. I suspect it's the latter. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We've got an interesting guest today, Joseph M. I believe his name is pronounced Lenard, L-E-N-A-R-D or Lenard. It's one of the two, but it's not L-E-O-N-A-R-D. It's L-E-N-A-R-D, and he's written a book called Terror Strikes. From what I gather, looking into it a little bit, it's pretty interesting. We'll be right back, guys. Stay with us. Instacart, another interesting concept. You can go to your favorite grocery stores, sign on to their application without leaving your home, the comfort of your home. Just pick out the items you'd like. They'll assign a personal shopper for you and deliver them to the point that you would like them delivered to. Another great concept, very user-friendly, and I'll be honest, we use it also. It's very effective, and they're very, very good. They're very on point. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and we have with us today a gentleman by the name of Joseph M. Lenard. He's written a book called Terror Strikes. I want to say hi to you and thank you for joining us, and I want to start off and ask you right out of the gate, tell us a little bit about yourself in this book.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, it's Joseph M. Lenard. I have to make sure the middle initial is in there because there's another Joseph Lenard that's an author. And of course, I want his fan base to accidentally buy my book, but I don't want anybody buying his book.
I did say, but Joseph, I did say M, didn't I? I did use your initial.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
yeah,
I had a feeling there was a reason you put it in there. I just was suspect. But in any event, I can fully appreciate people hijacking you because I've had it done to me. But in any case, no, I'm being serious. I won't get into the story, but I've had a successful private security group, and a lot of companies mysteriously used part of the name that I used, which was Elite. And so people would call companies looking for me, and they say, oh, he doesn't work here anymore. It was really very interesting. And I actually did it myself one time. But go ahead. Let's continue with this rather than my little saga.
Very underhanded of them, yes.
Yeah, we got some interesting characters floating around these days. But go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, you said it. I just wanted to reiterate it. And yeah, I've been writing my whole life. I'm the holder of more than 24 copyrights. But this is my first internationally published book because I felt it was really timely as there are people under the incorrect notion that terrorism somehow went away, that during the COVID lockdowns that you heard nothing about for 24/7, all the other news seemed to go away, that terrorists decided, you know what, there's a world pandemic. let's just all lay down our arms and be peaceful. Well, of course, that didn't happen, right? It's just that most people aren't hearing of thwarted events or events that are happening with the occasional rare occasion of like the
May
Waukesha,
I interrupt
Wisconsin
you for a
parade.
second? Because you just said
Sure,
something that's really interesting and highly relevant. People just aren't aware of the events that have been thwarted. That's an interesting
exactly.
statement, because I'm going to tell you something interesting, Joseph M. Lenard. Um, in law enforcement, we do something similar. We insulate the public from the harshness and the darkness of the streets. And I have to tell you, it probably would serve us if we allowed them to learn about the streets and to learn about these plots that were thwarted, because I think it would serve us in a greater sense. But I want you to continue. But I just wanted to key in on a very important statement you made, the fact that the public goes unaware of the efforts of the law enforcement and intelligence community. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No problem. Absolutely. I feel it needs to be said because I feel the way you do. Their efforts aren't appreciated until something happens that they didn't catch, right? And then everybody's all up in arms. Well, I mean, these are tough jobs they're dealing with. And you're right to apply it. And I do in my book, I don't just deal with terrorism, but crime in general. The book, one of the many themes, there are a lot of sub themes, and I like to say it's not about death, but about life and living. And with that comes not being stupid, having some degree of situational awareness. And like you alluded, people just aren't aware of a lot of things that are going on, and they don't hear except for the occasional thwarted terror attack or a thwarted crime. They only hear about the acts that have happened. So,
Well, Joseph, not to interrupt you again, sir, and I apologize. Part of the problem, and I think you're going to agree with this next statement, we're having selective reporting. If it doesn't serve a media outlet's political agenda and their loyalty to a particular political party, we're not hearing about things. An example of that, and I know you're going to jump right on this, is the border. We have one media outlet that almost overdoes it, and MSNBC and CNN, you never hear about it. But it's irrefutable what's happening at the border. Even Democratic elected officials have their underwear in a bunch over this. Yet for some reason, the White House isn't listening. Neither is Mallorca, who I strongly suggest is going to be out of a job soon. And I don't know if you followed the podcast, but I make a point of mentioning that about a month ago or so, I listened to the FBI Director Christopher Wray, who I've heard some unflattering things said about him, I won't get into why, come out and say the following: the southern border of the United States is a threat to our national security. That would be enough for me to hear in the White House, or if I was a Homeland Security Secretary. Apparently not. But what's so interesting is that, you're touching on this topic of terror, and you just mentioned crime as well. And I was just saying to someone prior to this broadcast starting that you would think the American public had enough, Joseph, and that they're prepared at some point in time to vote for people that are going to reverse this trend in our major cities, secure this country's borders, try to reverse this energy policy we have. And I don't know how we get the genie back in the bottle after you wasted $5 trillion. I still don't know where that money went, who benefited from that. And my big question, of course, all the time is, who's benefiting from the migration process? And without going off on a tangent and bringing up Chuck Schumer about a week ago, talking about 11 million plus people receiving amnesty so they can vote. The same guy in 2016 said how detrimental it was to this country to have an immigration policy where people could access the country, I would say, in a rather random fashion. And so did Obama say it. And for anybody who wants to question me, go into the AP. But I want you to continue.
Yeah, well, you touched on a few things. I made a note so I can make sure to touch on them all. But yeah, to go off the last thing you said regarding Schumer, Schumer also said, which they're quickly trying to bury the audio and video of, the replacement theory. Well, we are just not replacing enough Americans, so we need an influx of foreigners. Well, excuse me, Mr. Schumer, if we hadn't murdered 60 plus million children, American children in the womb over the last several decades, that wouldn't be an issue if it were indeed an issue at all. But
Joseph,
you
that
want to react to that?
interesting statement. But it's, this whole thing is a little slippery though, because I can see the merit in your statement, but I can also see the merit in certain instances for the need to have an abortion. That's why this is really, it's the most slippery topic there is in the country today, because I think there's so many variables attached to it. But, I start out by saying we need to learn to unconditionally support our women and stop the pandering. But it's interesting that you're saying we're concerned about population growth. I'm telling everybody what's happened in my lifetime. I'm not going to ask you your age. I won't dare do that. But I will tell you, when I was born in 1951, connect the dots here, the population was 150 million. We're at 335 million. With the growth comes problems exponentially. I don't know what makes people think we need more people. I'm trying to figure out, is the agenda of this government to turn us into India or China? See my point, Joseph? So I hear what you're saying, and that's a very good point you just made.
Yeah, that's why I carefully said, if it indeed is a problem at all, it's not. Let me just say that. And yeah, there's a difference, though, between life of the mother, rape and incest, and before a heartbeat is detected versus mass slaughter anytime, any place, any reason. Oh, I got a hangnail, I need to get an abortion. But that's a way off the beaten path issue. Although, like I did say, my book is not about death; it's about life and living. But
really, what we're talking about is our country and its overall health. And all of these topics intersect, Joseph. That's what I tell people. In other words, when you listen to me speak, I just go in different directions. I go off on these tangents. But at the end of the day, the discussions we're having will determine the future of this country and our young people. That's really what this is about. And for whatever reason, the agenda and the politics has taken precedence over what's best for this country. We lack leadership. I don't know if you were around for John Kennedy. I make reference to this man all the time because it wasn't the country was enamored with him. The world was enamored with him because of the way he was able to speak to people and make them feel as if he was speaking to everyone. We don't feel that way today. All we feel today is that everybody's got a focal point. Chuck Schumer just showed his hand. The very same hypocrite in 2016, and I have it in my phone right here. I could give you the AP in quotation about the detriment and the harm and how unacceptable it was to have people come into this country illegally. And Obama said the same thing. What happened? I have a bigger question, though. Maybe you can answer. You had control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Why wasn't this a discussion you brought up 23 months ago or within that window of time? Suddenly, you've lost control of the House, right? And now we're talking about it, Joseph. I'm sure you're seeing the same thing I'm seeing.
Well, it's because they don't want to fix the issue. They want to blather about the issue. They want to keep the issue, because as they say about politics often, the issue really is never the issue. It's, other things that they can make political hay of that particular issue. But going back, you mentioned speech, and yeah, my book deals with that. You mentioned the press and how some are endlessly discussing one thing and another completely ignores it, whether it be the border or any other topic. And I discussed that in my book about how some outlets are almost terrorist apologists, while others, the two extremes, like you were alluding to. But you mentioned the border and the issue of the border. Anybody can literally see online live border cams, and any 24-hour period, you're going to see a stream of people. And they've arrested, which is surprising, they've arrested anybody at all. It doesn't seem like there's any stoppage of flow, but supposedly they've interdicted people from more than 200 countries on this planet. So people, it's not a brown people thing. It's not a Mexican thing. It's not a racist thing. It's a security thing. Some people More than 100 this year alone on terror watch lists have been caught coming across the southern border. Now, what does that say? We always hear about gotaways.
Hold on.
Well,
I want to stop you for 1 second.
Thousands got away.
We're going to get into the gotaway discussion because that's highly relevant, and I don't think the public really understands what that translates to. But we're going to take a quick break, Joseph M. Lenard, and we're going to get right back on this topic. And we're going to talk about gotaways. We'll be right back, guys. Just stay with us. So let me tell you a little bit about Buzzsprout. Very interesting concept. Basically, it allows you to set up your own podcast. One of the most advantageous things about using Buzzsprout is it's user-friendly. So I encourage you highly, if your inclination is to create your own podcast, please look into Buzzsprout. And by the way, we use it. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and I have a gentleman with me today, Joseph M. Lenard, not to be confused with the Joseph Lenard without the M. He's written a book, Terror Strikes. He's written apparently quite a number of publications, but we're on some interesting topics today and topics that are highly relevant to the future of this country. So Mr. Lenard was just speaking about the border as I was with him and mentioning this term called gotaways. And I've said before on air, the number is upwards to 1 million people that have gone undetected. Let me correct that. Unencountered. They've gone detected. Cameras and drones. But go, continue, Mr. Lenard.
You are absolutely right to phrase it that way because, like you said, words have meaning. And unfortunately, there's a whole lot of people who like to twist the language. They can't have an honest discussion, so they try to revise the terms, like undocumented immigrant. Excuse me, no, they are illegal aliens. I'm sorry. We have a law. We have a right to a secure border, just as any and every other nation does. We have a door. The Statue of Liberty may say, give me your tired, your huddled masses yearning to be free, but Ellis Island was the front door. That's not needed anymore, but the principle remains. There are even gates to heaven if you're religious, right? There are walls. The Vatican has a wall around it. Borders matter. You have maybe a fence at your home. If not, you certainly have a front door.
You know, Joseph,
right? And you expect people to come through that.
Well, you know what's interesting about the conversation is that people seem to be incapable of understanding it's critically important that you be able to change with the times. I tell people one of my successes in my business, I should say there were a couple. A, no is not a word in my vocabulary. And B, I can stop on a dime and change direction. The notion of many countries, not just ours, having open borders is gone. The world has changed. You must change with it. I know we would like to have people just access the country, I go indiscriminately, but those days are gone because of a number of discussions. One of them has to do with terror, which you brought up at the beginning of this conversation. But, you know, the bottom line is we need to lend a fix to this thing because I know all the pitfalls. You know, my brain only works in one direction. Fix, fix, fix. I identify the problem, you learn from the problem, and you push forward. That's the exercise here. For some reason, that seems to be lacking with some of the media and some of the elected officials. And I go back and say this, it was incumbent upon the populace of this country to vote for people that are going to take this country in a different direction. And I'm just really caught off guard by the number of people that seem to be okay with the status quo that we have here. But I want you to do me a favor, please, and give me a little bit more of your backstory. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you were born, educated. You know, I think the public would be interested in that.
Okay, sure. I'll be willing to do that, but I want to throw one more thought about immigration before the train leaves the station. You know, it goes out of my head. I don't use this analogy in Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You because while it does deal in immigration, it does so from the opinion of my character, Martin, and the security aspect of the border. But you would not tolerate random people wandering through your front door and helping themselves to your refrigerator. Yet, why would we allow them to help themselves to the nation's refrigerator?
There's an agenda attached to that, my friend, and Chuck Schumer
Of
just
course.
showed his hand because they think. Listen, this is the reality of it. The masses of this country are conservative, and they're not, I would say, violence prone. I do know we have our own demographic within the conservative element that are on the fringe, and the Republicans have it too. Democrats, excuse me, both of these extremes need to be harnessed because they're both counterproductive. But the reality of the situation is we don't seem to have any boundaries or any consequences anywhere. And like your discussion about why would you let somebody come into your house and go through your refrigerator? I hate to break this to you, Joseph, but people are doing this in restaurants and stores every day with impunity. And this is all part of the problem. And now we just witnessed an election, like in the city of Los Angeles, they elected a mayor that's going to rubber stamp that. And in the state of New York, they just elected a governor who's going to rubber stamp bail reform, which is basically giving the criminal element impunity to do whatever they want. So this is a much bigger discussion. The question is, what's the end game here? What is it? Here's the question I always ask. When you've let 5 million people cross into the country illegally in a 23-month period, whose benefit was that for? When you've allowed the criminal element to go in and shut down businesses and terrorize communities, and the restaurants in New York City, by the way, are absolutely struggling because many people are afraid to go out at night, whose benefit was that for? When you shut down the Keystone XL pipeline first day or two into office, whose benefit was that for? Certainly not the American public. When you took $5 trillion against good advice, who is that benefiting? I don't understand where we're going with this. But what I really don't understand is why we're not trying to put into play some type of corrective measure. And the border is an easy one. To be honest with you, it's got to be temporarily shut so we can reorganize our assets and then allow migration to come in an orderly fashion, which you've alluded to. There's a way to come into the country today. Our major cities just start locking up and prosecuting. They're taking record numbers of guns off the streets in New York City. They're not prosecuting 85% of these gun arrests. Why are you bothering? And we can continue on and on with this thing. I want you to continue and telling us a little bit more about yourself because I interrupted you and I apologize.
No problem. And then I'll go back to crime because, terror strikes coming soon to the city near you. Again, not just about terrorism as crime, but general crime. But my background, really, I don't think all that interesting. I was born and raised in Southeast Michigan, a suburb of Detroit. Although, I can't stand these cold winters, I do still choose to remain. I'm a former IT guy. Like we'd mentioned, I hold over a couple dozen copyrights, although this is my first internationally published piece. I've been politically active in Michigan since the Reagan era. And you mentioned Kennedy. I was born in 1962. So, I was around for Kennedy, but not quite alert at that point to those things. So, but as to crime, like you said, why even bother to have, they're asking for new gun control laws when, like you said, they won't lock people up for the ones they've got. They plea away the gun crimes so that they can let them right back out on the street again to commit more crime. Like you said, you ripping off restaurants, right? What about these mobs into Walgreens, the Antifa and BLM riots? Still very few arrests and prosecution. So criminals running rampant because they know they can because of the left soft on crime policy. Yet, what are they talking about in the Senate? In Biden, like you said, after they lost control of the House, all of a sudden, new gun control measures are a priority when they don't enforce the current ones.
Joseph, this whole discussion by our elected officials in the media about gun control is just very disingenuous because the reality of it is this. There aren't going to be any gun laws. We just continuously lie and mislead the public, and we do it intentionally. The truth attached to this discussion is a rather simple one. CBS in 2019 July acknowledged 392 million guns in this country. My estimate was 500 million. I can tell you with certitude, since the pandemic, there probably been another 100 million guns purchased. We conservatively, okay, know of about 500 million guns in this country. I remind everyone, we had a period of history where we had no serial numbers. People just bought guns. Guns were never an issue. I tell people, gun didn't change, the culture changed. We don't want to talk about that for a second, though. The ATF has alluded to up to 1 billion guns in the country. We've got about 50 million assault rifles. Please tell me who the enforcement arm is on this. Why don't they stop lying to us and try to fix this problem? The problem, simply stated, is we have a mental health issue in this country, which was brought to light April 29th of 1999 with Columbine. We've lost a generation of children. We don't want to account for that, right? We don't talk about video games, the genre of movie coming out of Hollywood, the internet, failed parenting, which is gigantic and resonating through this country. We want to make you think that let's pass some more gun laws and tie the hands of people that aren't the problem. That's going to make things better. By the way, Chicago, I don't think you can buy a gun. 54 people a week are shot there. Look, you and I both know what the deal is here. The purpose today is to try to get us back on track, to start to educate the populace. I tell people I'm trying to give you food for thought. Go out independently and research what I tell you. I absolutely guarantee you're going to find out what I'm telling you is factually based. It isn't conjecture, speculation, or opinion, which is resonating through your media outlets. They're more qualified to tell you about gun control or how to get the country back on track as I am to do brain surgery. But the problem is we lack leadership. We've got to get someone into this discussion. And I'm not talking about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or Mitch McConnell or any number of these elected officials that have stayed too long, Joseph. We need to pass the torch to people that want to problem solve and fix this country. And these are not difficult problems. We have to stop letting a minuscule percentage of this country steer its course and its direction. I tell people this, and you'll appreciate it. 335 million people, 5% of that's about 5 or 6 million people. Could you imagine if we had 6 million people up in arms in this country every day expressing some dissent? We wouldn't be able to manage it. This is a minuscule percentage of the country. This is what's wrong with the country. We just can't seem to tell the truth, not in the elected officials world or the media outlet. And that has to stop. I'm sure you'll appreciate what I'm about to say next. Correct me if I'm wrong. We have no oversight with the media. Am I right, Joseph?
No, absolutely right. And to your issue or point, if all these people were guns were dangerous, as some want to allude to, there'd be far more mass shootings than there are. And to the certain media outlet agendas, 2.3 is the average death in a mass shooting where an armed law-abiding citizen is there to resist them. 14.3 is the average number of deaths where you have to sit on the line begging 911 to send the cops.
And we're going to hold you on that thought. We're going to go to a quick break. Come right back to you, sir. Just stick with me. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and we have a really special guest today, Joseph M. Lenard. Not to be confused with the Joseph Lenard without the M, because it's critical, trust me. He's the author of a best-selling novel, Terror Strikes. The book has been compared to The Sum of All Fears and Deep Impact. He's also a blogger, cancer survivor, podcaster, political activist. He's quite an interesting individual who's got a lot of mileage on him, I can tell, because he's understanding a lot of the ills of the country, and he's not shy about pointing them out. I want to ask you this, Joseph, if I may. What's the target reader for this Terror Strikes? Who do you think this book is designed to be read by?
And the other, we've pointed out several times the importance of my middle initial M, but it's also important to throw in there's no O in Lenard. It's Lenard.
And I asked about that before we got rolling. Yeah. I said, is it Lenard or Lenard? And of course, the producer so handily informed me the proper pronunciation. But go ahead, sir.
Yeah, but I get that a lot. Lenard. No, it's Lenard, but there's no O in it if you try to Google me, right? But yeah, what genre is it officially? It's a historical fiction book. I call it faction because it's a fact-fiction blend so that the historical aspects help set up the fictional storyline and vice versa. The storyline nature helps lend some facts that people are unaware of, since we don't teach history in this country anymore. But and you mentioned it's kind of like, some of all fears, but not with Jack Ryan, and Deep Impact. Well, there's certainly no meteor in my book, but it is the what did the government know? When did they know it? What aren't they telling us aspect there? So it's for young and old, male and female. It's not a blood and guts, shoot 'em up kind of. It's an intellectual pursuit.
Where can we find this book, Joseph? Where are we able to purchase this book?
Yeah, anywhere online, obviously, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or you could go to terrorstrikes.info and buy an autographed copy direct. I'd like to throw one thing that my disclaimer on my website says that alludes to what this book is about. Fair warning, many deem this book controversial and upsetting in many places, which it is meant to be. Meant to make people think. It's an intellectual pursuit, not a shoot 'em up. Challenge their own and others' intentions, motives, own morality, and mortality.
I want to ask you about international terror.
And yes, and my book is not only, although my main character is a Detroit newspaperman, and we follow him on his journey since he decides to write a book about terrorism. And it is indeed an internationally published book because it's an international issue and deals with the international issue. There's a chapter on Toronto, Ontario, Canada, London, England, Madrid, Spain, and Tokyo, Japan. So this isn't just a New York 9/11 thing.
I want to ask you this question, if I may. Are you prepared at this sitting to state that we should have grave concern that we're going to be the focal point of terrorist activity in this country again?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, it just, as it's meant to be a part of a warning, and yet still deal in so many other sub themes, like family and faith, because I try not to dwell on faith and politics too much, but you have to broach those subjects because they're part of the stated reasons why they want to kill us. There's a reason why the Ayatollahs and the Iranian leadership chant not just death to Israel, but death to America. Remember, they call us the big Satan. So after they nuke Israel out of existence, as Nostradamus may have predicted at some attribute to 9/11 quatrains, it is probably a nuclear assault on New York City by Iran.
That's an interesting prediction, I might say. Well,
it's not mine, it's Nostradamus's, but that's certainly our interpretation these days.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I think that the threat is there. What's so interesting is that during this administration, everyone seems to have stepped up their activity in developing what we call delivery systems, which is critically important. We already know North Korea has weaponry. In fact, South Korea is now asking for it, interestingly enough, to have nuclear weapons. We're watching Iran, this is just absolutely incredible what's going on with Iran. We're asking them for oil. They've got boots in the ground in the Ukraine, and they're supplying drones to Putin. I mean, if it weren't so serious, it would almost be comedic. But I go back and I'm worried about our country first, because we're the most resilient nation in the history of civilization, and we can pull this out of the fire. I believe that, but we've got to get all our resources kind of pulled in or together, so to speak, and the agenda shifted. My concern is that we may have gone too far. I'm not quite sure. I think this last midterm election was an interesting litmus test for the country and their willingness to move in a different direction, which I just don't see. I mean, we're just rubber stamping, for the most part, a lot of these policies. I am aware that the Republicans gathered or garnered a lot of state legislative seats and additional congressional seats, but at the end of the game, we don't have control of the House and the Senate, so we're not really going to get much done here, to be candid with you. This impeachment process, for example, of Mayorkas the Senate has to support it. You know that, and I know that. I don't know if it's likely. As far as the president goes, I think they strongly need to look at what he's done with this country in the past couple of years and determine if, in fact, this was in the best interest of this country. I'm looking at the border, and I'm curious to know your response to what I'm about to say next. I'm looking at treason. When your FBI director tells you it's a threat to your national security and you support a policy that lends itself to the threat of your national security, isn't that treason?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. And you mentioned the Senate, and it's important to interject here how important the Herschel Walker over Warlock race is. A 50-50 split. Sadly, so many people in this country don't understand the Senate and the power sharing rules under such of a 50-50 split, as opposed to if we allow them to have a 51-49 complete control. So Herschel Walker is not just running to save Georgia, he's running to save the nation from a bunch of liberal activist judges rather than rule of law constitution judges that Biden will be able to ram through the Senate under 51-49 that we can block more of under a 50-50 situation. But I wanted to mention Top Gun Maverick since we talked about Iran. Top Gun Maverick did as well as it did because it's not a woke piece of crap Hollywood film for a change. It's a pro-America film like Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You is pro-America, pro-life. And Top Gun basically is fictionally dealing with the Iranian situation. And, people want to know that, I think people know more what's going on than what the media wants to present to them. The narratives that they want to present, the people are waking up to things that are going on and what the threats indeed really are, despite the Biden administration wanting to bring back the JCPOA, the dangerous Obama JCPOA, that will aid and abet our enemy, who, again, chants death to Israel and death to America, and believe them when they say it. It's like people, Hitler just is engaging in hyperbole. The Nazis, they don't really want to exterminate anybody. It's just they say it, they mean it. When are you going to wake up to that historical fact?
I want to interject one thing because in reference to Iran, Netanyahu just was reelected again as the prime minister of Israel. And I think everyone needs to understand something. Israel's going to bomb Iran. That's the bottom line here. When Iran crosses that threshold of a delivery system and a weapon system, I'm just going to tell you straight up right now, as they've done in the past, they're going to go after Iran. They went after them before, if I recall correctly, with the development of a nuclear reactor, and they're going to do it again. And Israel really doesn't care about political opinion, coalitions, who's going to like what they did or not did. I think they're going to do whatever they need to do to preserve their nation. Joseph, we've got to go for today, but I want to invite you back. Please promise you'll come back, and I want to continue this conversation with you. There's so much more to be said. You and I both know one thing. We're in trouble here on many fronts, and now is the time to problem solve. Put our differences aside. Understand this is going to impact our young people, our children, our babies, and start to take this country in a different direction, which we have the ability to do. The question is, what elected official will step up to the plate and start to speak to the nation as a whole the way it once was? Joseph,
You're
thank
right.
you.
The nation is dying, and as Reagan said, we are the last great place, the shining city on the hill. And if we let America die, where is there else to go to?
I agree 100%, buddy. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. We appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, buddy. We'll be right back, guys. Just stay with us. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to get into a couple of emails. I have a young lady from Taos, New Mexico, where there's some awesome skiing, I might note. They helicopter you in, by the way. Cynthia from Taos. Lou, I think you might have it wrong. We, Democrats, voted for Democrats not because we don't care about the economy and crime. It's because we value our liberty and personal decisions on choice. Abortion was a far bigger issue that you and the Republicans believed. Can you acknowledge that now? Cynthia, unfortunately, no, because I've been very definitive of my position on abortion. I, first of all, support women unconditionally, period. Discussions about rape, incest, and ectopic pregnancies, which is a pregnancy that occurs in the fallopian tubes, are off the discussion. Women just have to do what they have to do in that regard. I think where this became a little skewed was the way it was intentionally misrepresented and hyped by the Democrat Party to divide this country. It is very simple what the Supreme Court justices said. They said issues that were not discussed in our Constitution would be sent back to the states for them to use their discretion as to how they wanted to implement them, right? Reserve. It's called a reserve clause. There's nothing here that changed. Nobody was wrong. You're just being caught up with the agenda of the Democrat Party, which is just desperate to maintain control, and they're destroying this country. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Republican. I'm not a fan of the Republicans. We're at an interesting point in time in history. We're picking the lesser of evils. But if you voted, in this last election because of your concern about this abortion discussion, which was intentionally misrepresented to you as to what transpired, it became so politically disgusting that you voted to continue to have impunity of the criminal element in your cities and your borders, I just say to you this: you are misguided. And I don't mean to say that to insult you, but I'd like to have a further conversation with you about this. Please feel free to call in. Thank you for that email. It was an interesting email, and it opened up the discussion, which I think need to be had. We have David from Burlington, Vermont. Beautiful up there. Well, there it is, Lou. Trump announced he's running in 2024. Either him or DeSantis will be getting the nod, but my big question is, who are the Dems going to run against them? Old Biden is done. Kamala isn't going to cut it. I can't think of another I can't think of anyone who will beat a Republican. Can you? I've got to tell you something. I'm really concerned about the electoral process today. I don't want to speak too much on it. I don't want to impugn its integrity, but there are some questions, guys. That's all I'm going to say to you. If I had to render a guess who their top horse is, it's going to probably be Gavin Newsom. I just think everybody needs to take a look at the state of California, a place that I'm intimately familiar with, starting with the year of 1971. It was the land of milk and honey. It was just an incredibly beautiful state with wonderful, gentle, kind people, kind of like the people in Florida. Something went awry there. Maybe it was the entertainment industry's overwhelming influence. Maybe it was the shift in political governing in the mid-'90s, but something's wrong in paradise, folks. I think the only person they may have that is the most viable candidate at this point is Gavin Newsom. I think he's their front runner. He packages well, but if you listen to him, I'm concerned about this guy. He's running a state right now. He's got a $97 billion surplus, rolling blackouts and water shortages. When are you going to fix these problems? They've been going on for decades. I got it. You want to give it away. Comes at the expense of the taxpayer. You have crime in cities. I was in San Francisco in 1971, this beautiful, gentle city with beautiful, gentle people. Go there now, ladies and gentlemen. It's lost its allure. The city of Los Angeles, all you have to do is listen to an LAPD detective, Jamie McBride, come flat out and tell you. And he's active. He's not retired. Advises people, don't come to LA. It's not safe. We can't protect you. What do you want me to tell you about Gavin Newsom? It's an incredible state, grossly mismanaged. We're going to go to another email. Gina from Echo Park, California. Rick Caruso's unsuccessful campaign to become mayor of Los Angeles has critics asking one question. Why was the real estate developer spending $100 million on a race focused on the homeless rather than simply using his wealth to build affordable housing and help the homeless? I absolutely baffled. Any thoughts? It's a good question, to be candid with you. He's not the only person that has a ridiculous amount of assets or resources. I mean, we're spending $250,000 and $250 million with Bezos and Elon Musk and all these individuals. Branson, excuse me. Let me correct myself. Branson and Bezos. You're right. These monies could be funded differently. But I've got a better question for you. Why is our government so inclined to pour billions of dollars into foreign countries, not into our own? You have a legitimate question towards Caruso. I could see that. Maybe he was that concerned about the condition of the state, or the direction that Los Angeles was heading, and he was inclined to spend as much money as he needed to capture that place because it's going in the wrong direction. You can sit here and live in the 51st state of America, the state of denial. LA is in serious, serious trouble. I have personnel that works for me there, current and former. I know more about what's going on in LA than most Los Angelinians. But at the end of the day, if you're going to point the finger at Caruso, there's a lot of other places to point it. Let's start with the federal government, where they're sending money. You're right about that. Let's see. The mayor in the city of Los Angeles spent $300 million on a complex on Randall's Island, which is a location where the fire academy trains for the city of New York. Okay? They just abandoned it. The question is, why wasn't that done for our homeless? Why aren't we doing something for the mentally ill? Nobody's helping anybody here, in case you haven't connected the dots on this one. All we get is a lot of discussion. I could talk to you about this ad infinitum. Guys have no idea these are problems that are solved. The problem is the leadership is awry here. These people that we think are smart are not as smart as people we think they're just not that smart, guys. If they were, they'd understand how to fix these problems the way I do. But you asked a good question, and I'm happy to answer that question. But it's a much broader answer than Rick Caruso. It's this whole damn country of ours. We're helping everybody on the planet except our own people. We've got people coming over the border in excess of 5 million in a 23-month period. We're taking care of them. We didn't take care of our homeless, our mentally ill, our veterans, which is just sinful. They're a big part of your homeless population, folks. Our children. You know, this is ridiculous. If you're upset with Caruso, I'm going to say justifiably so. Please be upset with the government in an overall sense. Guys, I want to thank everybody for listening today. I do want to thank Joseph M. Lenard for being our guest. We're going to invite him back. He has an interesting point of view and understanding of threats that this country's facing today. Stop taking this place for granted, guys. I'm going to tell you right now, if you think we can't lose it, please trust me, you're wrong. But know this, we could stop on a dime and change direction. I do want to thank our sponsors, Instacart and Buzzsprout. They've stuck with us through this thing. This platform is built off of Buzzsprout. And I will tell you proudly, Instacart delivers what they say they're going to deliver, which is kind of uncommon in this country today. Everyone's telling you they can give you the sun, the moon, and the stars until you pay for it, and then suddenly you get this thing called ungazzi, which is an Italian expression for nothing. Guys, thank you for joining us, and we hope you're listening, and we'll see you next week. And by the way, don't be shy about calling in or communicating with us through our betweenthelines.tv. Thanks, guys. See you next week.